Hello and welcome to episode 15 of 21 for 21 lessons for sport media in the 21st century. Today's guest is going to be our very own Stuart Levy, my co-host of this podcast. We've spoken to many people about their stories in sport and media, and we're going to talk a bit to Stuart now and find out what he does in sport media and how he got there. We have asked various people their stories of how they got to work in sport media and what they do. We're starting with myself in episode 6. But you can look back and there are quite a few different people that do various different things. We've spoken about content creation, social media. And today we're going to talk about sport marketing, Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Thanks for having me on, of course.
Thank you for being on.
No, it's definitely nice to. I know that we've spoken maybe a lot to people who you know from Barcelona sphere, so it's good to have that counterpoint of sports marketing and sort of away from the content creation and creating the stories, but still how our worlds interact, because that's of course how we got in touch at the start of the podcast. It's mainly because we were following the same pages, but from slightly different angles.
Absolutely. It's probably worth mentioning at this point as well that episode 10, we had your boss on, CEO of Irish Sport, and we'll talk a bit about Irish Sport again, Peter Webber, and he talked about kind of using data and analytics for sports organizations and sponsors. So that's maybe the context we could sort of jump on from. But you could tell us just a bit about kind of like what a day in the life looks like for Stuart Levy working in sport marketing and the kind of the data that you work with in Iris.
Yeah, so my role within Iris is within sales operations. So there's part of the day is not necessarily sport related at all. It's a lot of internal planning. So planning which sports organizations to contact and when, and doing a bit of some administration stuff as well. But no, you're right in terms of the sports data. So in this week, for instance, I was in Spain for the first part of the week, meeting with a number of cycling teams. So in terms of my day-to-day life in the preparations for that, so I was looking at the teams, either their social media data, so who is seeing their posts, which type of fans, which content works best for them, are they a successful team socially or not? And then the other type of data they could look at would be sort of TV and OTT exposure. So if we have a race, for example, the Tour de France, of course, being the most famous ones, it's little things like a team or a sponsor might commission Iris to provide an independent report into how often the logo appears on camera. Then it goes to little things like, is it on the right place on the bike or on the jersey? Are there different ways of activating that partnership on social media? So there's a lot of interesting things Iris does, and in myself, my own role, it's in introducing Iris to these customers or to these potential sports rights holders, sponsors and teams and federations we work with.
Okay, so kind of both sides of the marketing coin, as it were. You know, the teams or the federations being sponsored and the people that could be sponsoring that sport or event. Okay. We'll get into a bit about the kind of the research you do in a minute, because I want to ask you about, that kind of side of it. But I'm going to go jump in with sort of sales, because sales and marketing, and I often find myself on the I consider my more creative side of like the kind of journalist content creation. There are certainly content creators that see themselves kind of more on the corporate side, but really we have to be all very corporate, because at the end of the day, that's what pays the bills, right? I remember, I know we were on your story, but one of the first kind of job interviews I had was at a radio station. I said, I'm not interested in marketing and advertising and stuff. And he said, well, you have to be, because otherwise how are you gonna eat? and he I got a real telling off in this interview from the boss of this radio station. And so I think certainly I think that's a key role in in making everything, all the wheels turn within this sports media world that we've maybe overlooked actually until now. So tell us a bit about kind of the sales then. You say you connect the teams or the federations or the companies to Iris, but what's kind of involved in that in a hands-on sense?
Yeah, so you're right in terms of marketing and you being told off in this interview. I guess that's maybe looking at you as the consumer. You're interested in marketing because different foods are marketed to you. But in terms of, I guess there's two ways to answer your question: is how does Iris market itself to its services, and how does the sport business or sports marketing work? So, I mean, in my role, so Iris, we organize ourselves by posting on LinkedIn, by building a network on there, and also by attending these events such as the preseason camps in Spain or sports industry-wide conferences, just to get our name out there. So that's sort of how we would market Iris Sport itself. And then, yeah, sports marketing, you're right. So again, to use the cycling example, it's not necessarily marketing as in I want the cycling team to sell this many replica shirts in its shop. It's not necessarily consumer marketing, but it's using that data such as visibilities and exposure and sentiment analyses and all sorts of different KPIs just to ensure that they are positioned in the market to their sponsors and future sponsors and partners in the best way possible. So it's not just on these teams, football teams as well. They will have, again, these consumer marketing departments, selling literal tickets or subscriptions to the OTT platforms like the ones you work on. But from my point of view, it's more marketing to the sponsors on a business to business side.
Right. Okay. So it's true. There are. If you're like an extra party in this, it's quite easy to think that would use. I don't know. Trying to think of a really solid example. Back in the day, Leicester City and Walker's Crisps, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, Walker's Crisps and Leicester City would get this deal, and the overall aim would be for Leicester City fans to buy more Walker's Crisps. It's the kind of the in and the out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're kind of saying is you've got this kind of like extra step that you're there, kind of not mediating necessarily, but kind of saying, hey, Walker's Crisps, you'd be an ideal sponsor for Leicester City because Leicester City fans are big crisp eaters. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would be pretty much that. I mean, we can. That's possibly or the example of that maybe Walkers might have been involved because they're also a famous Leicester brand. But what Iris would do in that situation? So you're right. The marketing team for Walkers would want to sell more crisps, and the marketing team for Leicester would be wanting to market themselves as being a premium brand. And I guess the direct competition for Leicester City Football Club would be Leicester Tigers Rugby Club, who I don't think had any crisp-based deals. So
not to my knowledge.
Yeah. So what Iris could have done, or a company like Iris could have done, is to say, you're right, Leicester City fans, we could find out based on our data and our analyses that football fans are more likely to buy crisps than the rugby fans. I mean, this is again a simplistic view, but so Iris, it could also show. We wouldn't be able to tell Walkers, oh yeah, your 7% increase in salt and Lineker crisps was because of the sponsorship, but we would say, your awareness and your increase in social media followings or your increase in positive sentiment around Walker's Crisps amongst football fans and not just Leicester fans, football fans in general. So that would be the services that either, again, we could have worked for the sponsor Walkers or the club Leicester. So it would help Leicester evaluate themselves and say, yeah, your shirt sponsorship should be worth this amount of money because we can prove using this data that we're seen by this number of people. And again, of course, that would be depending on obviously progression in cup competitions or whatever, but on an average traditional or typical season for Leicester, this number of people with these interests in these markets will see your brand if you partner with us.
And that's very important for clubs or teams because essentially that's a big part of their income and how they pay their athletes.
Definitely, yeah. So again, it's making sure that the club are making as much money as possible, and also that they're not being partnered with a brand that's not fitting their club images either. There's a lot in the news about NFTs, of course, and we've done episodes on that as well. It's about if if there's some, because there's a bit of negativity in the news about NFTs because they're still not understood. So maybe if a club were to be promoting a more family image, for example, then they might choose that NFTs would not be the type of brand to partner with. So there's a lot goes into shirt sponsorship and sponsorship in general.
Yeah, there's a lot that's not thought about, I guess, from someone like myself. That essentially I'm just watching the football or the Formula One or whatever, and you see all these different logos that have thrust in front of you.
In doing this job, it is have a different thoughts. So I've noticed that at Manchester City now, at the Etihad Stadium, they have extended their advertising hoardings. So it's one of the things that I can't unsee now. So the pitch side advertisement, it looks like they've removed the first 2 rows of seating to make the advertising hoardings bigger. So they can now show either 2 logos at a time or the same logo but bigger. So next time you see a bit of Manchester City game, you'll notice it. But that's the sort of thing I picked up straight away, because now they're doubling the logo size of sponsors, therefore making the sponsorship more valuable, because the sponsor, again, Iris could tell Man City sponsors, even if your logo is only shown on screen for 2 minutes, it is twice as big as before, it's twice as valuable as spot as before.
And I don't know if you kind of go into this or if it's something you've worked in. There are these advertising hoardings. I imagine Manchester City has them that can be different depending on where in the world you are. They use kind of augmented reality.
Yeah. So again, I've not. Yeah, I know them. I guess they work in a similar way to even Google ads or something that they can. I guess that's the end goal. It's either to the individual watcher or viewer on a stream that they can change the adverts personally. But no, I mean that would be
sure.
It would be the same thing. An example in rugby, the Heineken Cup is always called the H Cup in France because alcohol advertising is banned in France. So that would be the example. That would now increase Heineken sponsorship value because they would now be able to, using that technology, advertise an alcohol-free brand for the French.
I was going to say alcohol-free brands have had a boom here in Spain because of the advertising rules.
Okay, yeah. So again,
every major beer brand now has a 0.0 version or a 0% version, so that they can still sponsor their teams.
Yeah, no, he's right. This technology, that would be the main example in when you're brought, I guess, the Premier League, super popular in the Middle East. When you're advertising the Middle East, even you could sell that to Coca-Cola, obviously less alcohol in the Middle East. The Coca-Cola could be the drink sponsor, and then a Heineken or a beer brand could be the sponsor to those in the stadium or those watching in countries without those regulations. Yeah. So no, it's a good point. Do you know where those are? Is that still a future hypothetical or
no? It's
using it right now?
I can't tell you what clubs because I don't know, but I've seen it in action, as it were. Like I've seen clips from various different broadcasts from around the world, and in parallel, and they're or maybe it was edited, and maybe it's a proposed thing, and they edited it so that it looked that way. But it's definitely like I've seen several
for a while
videos about it.
Yeah, but no, I can't think where I've yet seen it actually in action, or whether it's something's part of it.
But I guess in some sense that means it's working, because we shouldn't see it in action. It's
definitely.
We should be unaware of it as viewers. It's I mean, it doesn't surprise me when on I don't know, Instagram, you can put whatever filters on your face and do all kinds of stuff. The sort of the technology that's being used to broadcast Premier League matches, for example, is far beyond what Instagram uses on our mobile phone. Okay, so the other thing that you talked briefly, that the kind of things that you do when you met with the cycling teams, for example, you did a lot of research on them, of kind of what posts are working for them, what, I don't know, you look at their social media. Are there kind of any tools you do for that, or how is that research kind of done?
Yeah, so specifically with the social media tools, we use a crawling tool. So that's where we have the lists of all the cycling teams listed in our database, and then crawling tool, it sort of pulls all the facts and figures and puts it into our easy to use dashboard where we can run analyses, run comparisons, and things like that. So it's just and one thing that we say to future customers is, don't worry about that. We have the tools, we have the back end systems, and we can get whatever, run these analyses based on a lot of things that are happening in the background. So that's the social media side, and then the logo detection for the sponsorship visibilities. That's, I guess, uses similar technologies that a facial recognition technology would do almost. Again, it's semi-automated, so we would record a game or record the event, and we would set it up to detect this logo and how often is it showed on the screen during the game or during the event.
Oh wow! Okay. Oh wow! I had no idea that even existed.
Yeah, no. So it's again, it almost seems it kind of straightforward, but it is just like, if you're,
it makes sense.
If Leicester are playing in a brand new Walker's Crisps kit, then we could just track just that Walker's logo across the different visibilities across the broadcast. And then there's another from market research, we have access to panel providers where we can, and we mentioned, do football fans like crisps, so we can put that into a live panel thing, so where people are surveyed daily, and we can understand their habits and their consumer intent and begin to match groups of fans with suitable industries.
Oh wow! Okay, I'm just thinking about the logo tracking. Like, if it's on a bike, obviously that's important where your logo is, because if they're I don't know, every shot of whatever star rider, Chris Froome, I don't know, I don't follow cycling enough. But if every shot his legs covering every time his leg goes around, he covers up the sponsor for a second, a brief second. That's not where you want your logo to be, I guess.
I mean, that was a particularly big topic around the Olympics, because the only advertising allowed on the field or play during the Olympics are the equipment providers. So that's a big thing for. I won't give you this particular example because it is a direct client, but in terms of, should we have a big logo specifically where, and how often is it most, based on the play or the field of play of that sport, where would it most likely to be obscured? In which case, don't put it there. Put it on the left chest or the right chest, or whatever, depending on exactly on how the game of play, field of play works. So that's particularly important in the Olympic field, is because this advertising is so limited just to equipment providers. So that's the important thing you got to be aware of.
I hadn't even considered that. Yeah, of course, every, I don't know, you put on a t-shirt, and for a football team, of course, it's across here, but for a different sport, I don't know, like rugby, maybe they hold the ball here, right? Or
it's that sort of thing. You're right. Yeah, or in cricket, the way you stand just to bat the ball, maybe you're getting in the way of logos by the way you crouch. It's that sort of thing. Absolutely. Where is the best place to put in your sponsor logo?
Absolutely, these are things I'd never even considered. Like, never even stopped to consider.
Yeah. And then again, back to again, my role is typically in sales. So when speaking to a customer or a potential customer, then we have the mix of people. There are people working in the sports team who might have no idea this technology exists, in which case we need to tell them about it, or it's the mixture of people who know exactly how this technology works, and we need to tell them why Iris is the best solutions provider. So there's two camps. It's trying to educate those who have no idea why Iris services might be useful, or telling people why Iris services that they already know about should switch to us from what they're currently using, or why Iris gives that added value from other companies offering similar services.
Sure, and so you're selling a service that doesn't necessarily have to apply to sport, right? It could be logos for, I don't know, a car in a movie, a James Bond movie, Aston Martin or something. But as it is for sport, and there are so many, you need to know sport, and you need to know sport broadcast. That seems quite clear to me, because I mean, you would have given examples of covering the logo playing cricket, but these are really important things that you'd need to know in order to be able to make this sale, or to do your job.
Yeah, no, completely. Yeah. So that's perhaps why Iris. I mean, certain other companies might have a TV, like a movie division, like you say. But Iris, one of its selling points that it is still operated by its founders, like Peter, who we met on the podcast a few weeks ago. So no, you're right. We need to completely know the sport. It's no good just saying, yeah, this data proves that your sponsorship is worth more than you're receiving. Like you need to, again, sales is a lot of personal relationships. Like I was brushing up on my cycling small talk. Yeah, I'm not a diehard cycling fan, but I know a bit. And I know it's part of my research. It's not just researching the data on the teams; it's researching where did they finish in the UCI World Tour last year. What are their chances for this year? Who are their star riders?
Sure. No, maybe the movie idea was a bad example. I was trying to sort of a bit.
No, it's
fixated on logos, but
yeah.
One of my first jobs, I was selling Nokia phones, and all I had to do was learn what the Nokia phone does differently, and kind of reel that off. But for every client you approach, like you say, you need to know about their team and their star athlete or the sport, how the sport works. So you must be sport mad for the most part, no? You like I consume a lot of sport, but you must consume a lot more and far greater variety.
That's the it is true. So in another Inside Iris, also here since I came, so I've been here a couple of years now, but it's mainly a German company. So in the Christmas sports quiz in my first year, because it was all in German, I was knowing all the answers, but it was on fingers on the buzzer, so the language skills were letting me down.
Oh, no.
Now this year's the Christmas just gone. Language skills were a bit better, so I came third. So I'm third in the sport quiz. So to answer your question, yes, I know a lot about sport. And then in terms of my job, my personal life, the aim is to improve the German enough in the next year to be winning that sport quiz.
I was going to say that's a good aim to improve your German is for the quiz.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good anecdote. So, I mean, you're selling this to me quite well. Like your job sounds really great. I thought I had a cool job, but you're traveling all over. You're meeting teams, and we're talking important teams, professional cycling teams. Or I remember when we first started recording this podcast, you'd just been to visit, I think, Formula One event.
That's my where were you when moment. I was on the way to the Belgian Grand Prix when you first messaged me saying let's do a podcast. So that is for me the spiritual home of the podcast is the Spa circuit, because I was on my way there when you first pitched the idea.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So it sounds really exciting. Like you're traveling around, meeting, watching sport, which you can't really complain too much about that. That's your job is to watch a lot of sport and travel around and meet these. It must be interesting people. I imagine I've never met a cycling team. I don't think. I know someone actually that's just signed with a cycling team to do some of their marketing, but I've never met anyone on a cycling team as such. But they travel the world for their love of their sport.
Completely. So again, to stick with the cycling example, I think their job theme seems pretty cool. So
right.
So as part of that personal networking thing. So I was actually only in Spain for a few days, but I had to make it sound like I was there all week just to play it cool, just from a positioning point of view. So with one of the teams, we're already making plans to meet at the upcoming races in the Netherlands or Belgium, which are close to where I live in Germany. So right, it's a lot of building personal relationships, but also again, you can't complain when those personal relationships are in different places around Europe. So it's combining a love of travel I had from back in the day with a love of sports. But it's definitely a pretty nice position I've got at the moment. So I certainly can't complain.
Sure, no, absolutely, and it does seem in this world of sport media, or sport in general, I think you spend a lot of time meeting people with quite cool jobs, and you kind of want to get to know them, which is why this podcast has been ideal for us, because we've spoken with 13 guests and about their cool jobs.
That's pretty much it. Again, it's another reason why it's a good idea from my point of view to start it, because it's helping me develop those networking skills and those personal skills. So when we had Matt Dunn, for example, talking about MotoGP, again, for my general sport interest, I had a bit of a MotoGP interest or knowledge, but it just gave me a good reason to go back and revisit some classic races, just to ensure I had that bit of entry level chit chat available.
Nice, yeah, that's quite cool. So to not pry too personally, but how did you get here? Like, what's your kind of, because you're like me, you've left England, you've left Nottingham, you left Bridgeford even, which for those of you who don't know, Stuart and I are from the same small town in Nottingham, and we're now in different parts of Europe. What's kind of, was your kind of dream always to work in some kind of sport related job or industry, or did you kind of stumble across an opportunity like essentially I did? Really, I kind of wanted to make videos, and I just happened to be making about sport, which I think is extra cool. What's kind of your path here?
So I think as it would be a theme we've touched on is you work in sport either because like you've got the passion for the production, you happen to be doing so in sport, or for me, I have the passion for sport, and a job in sport in any context is the ambition. So my first role in sport, it was I was a volunteer at the London Olympics, and that was something I'd registered for or registered my interest for like years before, like at least 3 or 4 years before the games itself.
Right, yeah.
I put them in my registered interest. So my role there, it was not sport related. It was working in the entertainment team. So I was taking amateur performers, so buskers or Morris dancers or break dancers, just around the Olympic Park and just hanging out with them and taking photos of fans. So I think my record was, so the role was I had to look after these performers. So I took this band to perform outside the Olympic Stadium. And I think I took 100 photos in a row. People can take a photo of me in front of the stadium, take a photo of me in front of the stadium. So it's just being there, being at a major sport event and being involved really. So I got to watch a lot of cool sports events, and also just be there in the height of the Olympic Park and just enjoying the atmosphere really.
Sure, and that was quite a momentous occasion, for England and for London, and that just shows your dedication to sport, I guess, that you wanted to be part of it any way possible, and you were there. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. That was at the end of my first year at uni. So then, inspired by that, I guess. So I next did a small work experience. So the following Christmas holidays, over the winter 2012, I worked for Carlton Town, who are in the 8th division of English football. So I did a month-long placement with them. So it was mainly involved around planning their Christmas fundraising. So I sold raffle tickets. I got in a couple of sponsors for a day at Solo Racecourse, so a local racetrack, and also just did a bit of updated the website, and I even went to training once, and even in the 8th division, I could see their 8th division, I must be a 20th division player. So they honestly they did have that high quality and even at that lowish level. So so certainly playing sport was never a realistic option. So working in it is the next best option.
Sure.
So
I think that's true of a lot of people we've spoken to, right? It's kind of
when they realise they're not going to be making it as a player, you're right. Then it's going into
some kind of
sport too,
some part of the industry.
Yeah.
Okay. So has it always kind of been? I have to admit, I'm flicking through your LinkedIn now, and I always sort of talk about podcasts
there's a lot there,
being a way to pry on your friends. But say anything you want to volunteer, feel happy. But Carlton Town, and then Volleyball England, Leicester Tigers, England Rugby at Twickenham. There's some big names in the world of sport that are, or certainly in UK sport that are.
Yeah,
you've got kind of on your quite an interesting resume.
I'll add the next thing is kind of a
Sure.
I was saving it for this episode. Actually, I'm not sure this is something you know from the time, but I was actually in the press box at the Camp Nou before you were.
Oh, there you go. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
that's sprung a surprise. There's a
No, so I guess I mean, there's no reason why you would have saw it, but I realized a few weeks after we went into this podcast, I had mentioned it, so I guess you didn't know, but so just completely randomly, another school friend of mine, actually, he had the idea to just write to random clubs in Europe to ask for a press pass. So we one of the ones we was Barcelona. So I pretended to be the editor of the university newspaper, which I wasn't, but that was the hook, the line in, and I said I was going to write a piece on Catalan culture, and they replied within 2 days saying, "Yeah, sure, here's your ticket. Here's where you show up." So so my friend had applied to be a photographer, and I pretended to be the journalist, but he never heard back, and I did. So yeah, we thought it was too good an opportunity to turn down a free ticket to go and watch Barcelona. So yeah, I went to the Camp Nou on it was that weekend for a game against Sevilla. And I'd heard from, or I've seen on Twitter, like, kind of journalists always say, oh yeah, the press box at this game has great pies, and the press box of this food has great whatever food. So I assumed it would be the same in Barcelona. So I got to the stadium at 8 p.m. for a 10 p.m. kickoff, and I was the first person in the entire stadium, and there's no free food at all. And so I was sat in the press box at Camp Nou, hungry and cold, because it was February in Barcelona, and I didn't realize how cold it was at 10 p.m. in February in Barcelona. So that was a pretty fun adventure. And again, the reason I'm bringing it up is, again, it's a nice link into where you are now, working legitimately in the press box of the Camp Nou. But that trip was the first time I'd gone sort of traveling rather than on holiday, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So so that gave me the interest in travel, which has eventually brought me to Germany, but also a nice little anecdote into an early career move, as you say, from the LinkedIn. There's lots of random jobs, some of them in sport, like short-term ones, such as Leicester Tigers. That was a match day role. The Rugby World Cup, that was more planning, and so it was just in the match days held at Leicester and Birmingham. So it was just a few days before each game, just be planning where we want the volunteers, what time do the trains get there, where would we most need the staff. So again, that was a really fun job, mainly because of the team spirit amongst the people who were doing my job. There were a few people similar to my age, so like early 20s, a few grandparents, and other people aged in between. So it was a nice, completely mix of people all getting together for rugby. So yeah,
that's great. I think it just goes to show two things. One, how much you absolutely love all kinds of sport, and two, just how dedicated you've been for such a long time such a long time, but so from the moment you left university, that you wanted to work in the world of sport one way or another, and here you are living that dream.
Yeah, no, sorry, I have one other story that I've been saving to tell you. So at the one of the Rugby World Cup games in Leicester, one of the fans I bumped into was your brother.
Oh wow!
And then I went to school with, and then when I saw him a few weeks later, just on a night out in town, he was like, "Oh yeah, so you work at the Rugby World Cup? That's pretty cool. You're going to definitely get me a ticket to the next Rugby World Cup in Japan." So I said, "Oh yeah, sure," because I assumed that my career in sport would get me into a place to get your brother a Rugby World Cup ticket for Japan. And then he reminded me about that the next 2 or 3 times I saw him. And I now haven't seen him in a very long time, and I didn't get a ticket to the Rugby World Cup in Japan. But the next Rugby World Cup is in France. So that's now back to the point. It's now I'm in a realistic position. So if Iris gets some sort of involvement in the Rugby World Cup in France, so I'll re-extend my offer to Dan for a free Rugby World Cup ticket in Paris after I avoided him since not helping him out for Tokyo.
Well, you might be off the hook. He's not mentioned it to me. He's not said anything. So.
Yeah, well, if he's a listener, I'll again. I think that is because of, again, the distance from Germany to France. That is a realistic proposition for me, seriously, to get some sort of opportunity to go to that event and
the World Cup again,
and network and build things. So yeah, that's the aim.
What a cool life! You could just pick out major sporting events, like that's near enough to Germany to come up with a good enough reason to go networking.
No, I mean, it's we kind of joke about it, but it is a legitimate strategy. So that's where they'll be. I mean, we want to speak to 5 sponsors at once of either World Rugby, the organisers, or the individual rugby federations, rather than call them all up randomly and have successions of Teams calls and connections don't work, or people have to go, or the kids in the background. Just there's nothing beats really for that sort of thing. Actually going to the event and networking and making those connections in person.
So that segs us quite well, actually. It's almost like we've planned it. I was going to ask you next about the kind of the skills that are involved. We talked a bit about your day-to-day, kind of how you got here, which just seems to be a dogged determination to work in sport one way or another, and have quite a lot of fun along the way by the looks of things. My next kind of question was going to be about the sort of skills that you need should somebody want to enter into this amazing world of going to sports events and meeting interesting people. Networking is one that's come up repeatedly on this podcast.
Yeah, certainly. So it just being willing to, I can't remember who used this line before, but the best way to work in sports is to work in sports. So again, my first experience at London 2012, that was a complete one-off, but the second experience at Carlton Town, I mean, if you're listening to this in the Nottingham area and you want to work in sport, give Mick, their chairman, a call right now. So he's the sort of entry level position that there are local clubs like Carlton or all around Europe, all around the world who need help, and if you're willing to, or if you can see that end goal for yourself of a professional position, then just making sure that you're there gaining the experience. And even though, again, to use that particular experience, there was some particular Microsoft Word little technique that I picked up there, which is obviously practical for work, but also from a sport point of view, I can say that I sold a player. I drafted up a contract. We sold a player for £600 at the time. So we have sold a player, organised sponsorships, written a column in the match day program. So even though it was on a lower scale, it's things you can say you've done, and made a good impression. And what I could have. You can network with the owners and the sponsors of other teams as well, and just build your network and get to know people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So your question was more, what skills do you need more?
What skills do you need? But but I think that's a we talked about networking, and I think that's a great answer of look who you can network with, who might be more approachable. You're probably not going to get the chairman and CEO of Manchester United, but you might be able to get it off Carlton Town.
Yeah, that's why I was so impressed when we had Tom Carter, and he said he was emailing his favourite clubs, and he was only emailing PSG and Barcelona. So I was like, why didn't I think of that? Why was I contacting Carlton Town when I should have been?
Yeah, but you did. PSG, you were here at the Camp Nou.
Yeah, that's true. But no, it is. If you, I mean, Tom maybe had some luck, but if you do want to work in sport, then you've got to work in sport, and that might mean Carlton Town or Birmingham Knights, so a basketball team I did an internship with. Again, when I was at university, they lost every single game in that season. It was their only season in existence, but it was I was in the end the company that owned the team, so they offered me a permanent job at the end of it. And I turned it down in favour of the Volleyball England one because it had the more sporty focus. But if I hadn't been but again, in this basketball job, it was unpaid. It was an internship during studies. But when else would you get the chance to work for a top division English sports team? So just put yourself out there and be polite, have that sporting knowledge. Again, I had enough. The things like I once had to, for that job, write a match report for a match I hadn't even watched because I was working in the club shop, so I couldn't see the court at any point of the game. But so you had got to be flexible, be innovative, and you have enough sporting knowledge to write a basketball match report for a basketball match you haven't even watched.
I'll let you into a secret and let you know that happens in the professional world at high levels.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe not quite at the Premier League, La Liga levels, but I've known people to write reports about events that they've not necessarily seen, or they've seen a highlights sort of package of it.
Yeah. Whole thing.
Yeah. No, I'll move on from there before I get myself into any trouble. So what about kind of on a day-to-day basis of what you do now? What kind of skills do you have to employ? You already mentioned, like, picked up kind of a bit of ability with Microsoft packages in your various kind of experiences. What other kind of day-to-day skills do you?
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult like question. Cause I know I should have prepared a specific answer if I need skill X, skill Y, but no, it's more just basic things like listening and communication skills.
Okay.
So I'm working almost fully remotely. I've not been into the office for some time, so it's making sure you trust your colleagues and your colleagues trust them. It's making sure you have a good social media and understanding of the data, or make sure you know where to ask or who to ask if you're not sure on something. It's just having the teamwork skills, having the computer skills, or being able to admit if you were where to get help or where to find more information from. And it's just again being able to be flexible and be a team player. So even though this Spain trip we spoke about, I was there alone from Iris. It wasn't a solo mission, so I'd work with my team on drafting a strategy of what to talk to the teams about, and sort of it was another colleague's idea to specifically approach cycling teams in the first place, because he had more of the sporting knowledge that these preseason training camps happen. So even though it was just me taking the selfie on the beach earlier in the week, it was a team effort to have done enough work to go there. So again, if there's some direct revenues or a new contract we sign with one of these teams, then it will be making sure that the colleagues who actually put the data together or put the final reports together are fully briefed and fully aware. So there's a lot of communication and just knowing who to ask for what I think is the best.
Sure.
Is the best skill, and again, linking it back to sport, knowing what sport is.
How important is social media for you personally? And I know you use LinkedIn quite a lot. But you must be the kind of the contact person for Iris with a lot of these teams. If one of these cycling teams kind of signed with Iris, you're their guy kind of thing. Is that right? Am I right in thinking that? And then also, how important is social media for you personally and your kind of public image, as it were?
I mean, sort of. I mean, there is a specific head of digital who isn't me, so she is the expert on social media. But I think my knowledge and understanding is good, and we've obviously, when we've done our TikTok episode on episode 2 right at the start, I mean, I only really started properly looking into TikTok because it was a sponsor of Euro 2020, so I needed to know about it for work reasons. But no, in terms of in personal life, LinkedIn I've only started using properly or posting regularly when I've been here working for Iris. And then in personal life, like I've been tweeting this podcast, but I don't really otherwise tweet. And then again, Facebook and Instagram I have, but I don't typically use them personally. But that's just maybe a personal preference thing, or maybe a generational thing. I know that Facebook is less popular amongst younger people now than it has been. So
I was just curious more than anything, sort of see how you put yourself out there, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So okay, that's I kind of a lot of important skills that you need to build along the way, and I guess you've gained from such a sort of variety of experiences in and around sport. You kind of touched on it already. You were talking about people looking for internships and kind of taking on anything that you could do, whether it's writing a match report or working in the team shop or I don't know, showing around people at the Olympics, which sounds great in itself. What could you recommend to people that want to find a way into sport media?
I guess there'd be two ways of doing it. I mean, we've touched on in Iris, there's a lot of the data side, actual data processing that I don't do. So I mean, if you have a passion of a niche such as, I know, data processing or market research, for example. So if you have a love of sport and a love of something else, then you can develop something else and see if there's some way you can attach that into sport down the line. So if you have an interest to gain yourself a niche, then go ahead and do so. Or if not, the other recommendation is get out there and work in sport, whether that be launching your own blog or vlog or TikTok account and talk about the sport you love, or whether it is going in at the deep end and you have a volunteer at the local club or the local organization or the local event. And yeah, I mean, there are plenty because I mean the various. I mean, the see on LinkedIn or on UK sport websites, another good place. There are always volunteer opportunities because there are so many major events held in the UK. Maybe if you're not there are lots of tennis competitions in the summer, for example. So even if you're not a tennis fan, but you want to experience an event, there's the Nottingham Open, Birmingham, Eastbourne. There are plenty of tennis competitions that have plenty of volunteers each year where you can just get that experience of working at an event, of seeing what happens on the operational side and just adding it to your CV going forward.
Yeah, and even amateur or semi-professional clubs and teams are looking for. We mentioned it right at the start of the podcast. If a club or team has greater visibility, then they have a greater chance of getting a better sponsor, and they can bring in more money, and that cycle kind of repeats. We talked about Leicester City and Walker's Chris, and at that point, I have to admit that we're both not living in England anymore, and I do miss Walker's Chris. But you can get in touch with these kind of small local clubs, and I don't know, I'll help you run your social media, or I'll try and talk to you about how you can improve your social media. Maybe you could do like an online analytics course, Google Analytics, and look at what's working for that website or Facebook or whatever. And
again, that goes back to the niche. If you're interested in Google Analytics, then offer your services. Obviously, women's sport is another big thing. Obviously, there's so many women's teams around now that don't quite have the budget still, so that might be the best chance of a volunteer entry point and say, I've got this certificate of Google Analytics, let me take a look at your website and help you gain more sponsors for your team. So that's a good idea.
Yeah, nice point. We'll start wrapping this up, I guess. Unless there's anything else, any other anecdotes you've got for us, because you seem to be, you've got plenty. Yeah.
Trying to think. No. We'll save them the same for another day. But no, it's been good to chat more. Because again, I did take a look. So we've been connected on LinkedIn since 2015. So I can't remember why we would have connected in 2015, but
we knew each other, I guess.
Yeah. So what I mean, it's always about making those links and making those connections. Because we connected so many years ago, and it took us until last year to realize to connect and start talking. Yeah. So don't discount someone because you haven't spoken to them for a while, or you might not know them too well personally. It's good to say hello and keep in touch with people, because most people are nice once you get to it.
Yeah, one lesson then, because nobody gets off the hook, and we've asked everybody. So one lesson that you've learned in your years working in sport. And not necessarily about getting into sport, but something that you could say, I learned that was important for me to learn here at Iris or the Rugby World Cup, or
I don't know. Well, I was going to say something like, I'll say it.
I can't believe you've not prepared this, because you knew this was coming. This was like the one question you definitely knew was coming.
Yeah, no, let's go for always say thank you. And again, this is to link it to the sport again, because a lot of my experiences at the start were in an internship role or an entry level thing. People are, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, 2-3 years later, and I've had to require references from these people they aren't going to remember, Stuart did a really good Excel spreadsheet 2 years ago. Going to remember, Stuart, we liked him, and he was a nice guy. So for me, if I had to say one lesson, it's always say thank you.
I like that a lot. It's a bit different to some of our other lessons. But yeah, thank you very much, Stuart. I've certainly learned a lot about you, and like you say, we've been connected on LinkedIn for some 7 years, in which case we said 2015. Yeah. But we've known each other far longer, directly or so I think I've learned a lot about you, but I've learned a lot about the industry that you work in, and maybe now when they come to me with data about what works and what doesn't for the content that we're producing, or the sponsors are saying this, and maybe I'll take it a bit more seriously, because I should take it seriously.
Yeah, no, when we were talking early today before we went live, of course, you said you had some sort of sponsor day you were working at, so that'll be that type of thing. And those sponsors, they will have to look at the data and say, yeah, our sponsorship of Barcelona has been valuable or not valuable based on these metrics from providers such as Iris, not Iris, unfortunately. So FC Barcelona, if you're listening, give me a call. But yeah, that's the sort of thing they need to justify their association with Barcelona with.
Yeah, absolutely. Really interesting. Thank you very much, Stuart. And there you go. Stuart's lesson 15 put into action.
Good. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me on the other side of the the couch, as it were, Jamie. And yeah, look forward to being back in the presenter's chair for our next few lessons. So thank you for all for listening.
I hope it's not been too unpleasant an experience.
No, it's been good to catch up. More than anything, it's been good to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. Worth reminding everyone, if you do go to our YouTube channel, there is a whole little section of, we call them So You Want to Work in Sport Media, and we've got a whole variety of people that have, just like Stuart's done today, and I did myself in episode 6, talked about what it is they do, how they do it, and how they got there. And I think there are some great lessons, if you are interested in working in sport media, that you could follow to try and get there. So yeah. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll catch you on lesson 16. We're powering through.
Fine, through. Thanks a lot for listening, guys.
Cheers, Stuart.